Welcome back to another round of Camp Chapters. All right, we are going to be reading The Secret Life of Amanda K. Woods once again. Thank you, Scholastic, for allowing us to read this. And thank you for following along and reading with me. So we are going to read chapters 5 and 6, which are about Lincoln School and luck. So what we are going to do is we're going to read those, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions about them. And I just want to recap real quick what happened last time. We talked about the Rome Hotel, the hotel that her father owns, or her family owns. And we talked about Rome as a city, town, village itself. So let's move on to Lincoln School, where Amanda goes to school. Amanda ran down the empty hall at Lincoln School, where you were never supposed to run. At the corner where the stairs began, she almost ran into the principal, Miss Deverest. She was wearing one of her many brown dresses, the exact color of the dull bricks of Lincoln School. "Amanda, no running," she said. She had been Amanda's third grade teacher. Amanda thought she had a special glint of dislike in her eyes, but who could tell? Even Margaret said the Lincoln School teachers hadn't been standing in line when God passed out the smiles. You could only guess how they actually felt about anything. It seemed as if they didn't hate children, but they didn't like them either. They didn't hate teaching, but probably they didn't especially like it either. It seemed as if they weren't happy, but they weren't unhappy either. When Amanda had described them to Lyle, he had got a bright-eyed, feverish horror comic reading look on his face and said, "Lincoln School, home of the walking dead." Amanda, not exactly running, hurried to the top of the stairs. The new fifth graders were crowding into their room. Amanda's place, as usual, was in the back corner of the room next to the windows. She always got that place because her name began with W. And she was glad, because it meant that she could watch the family of squirrels that lived in the maple tree out the window. Also, she could read library books under her regular books, unnoticed, and pretend she wasn't at Lincoln School. Mary Jane Stotlenberg, as usual, sat next to her. Amanda didn't like Mary Jane from way back from second grade, when Mary Jane had talked about nothing but her precious paper doll collection and the 14 sets of outfits she had for each doll, and every girl but Amanda had thought it was so interesting. At that time, Amanda had frankly told Mary Jane and everybody else that paper dolls were for sissies. Now Mary Jane's gaze skidded across Amanda's face, but while Amanda was actually thinking of saying a friendly hello, Mary Jane looked elsewhere. Kids talked to one another and opened desks to see if any old bubble gum was still stuck inside them. Their new teacher, Miss Vivian Harmon, clapped her hands and said, "People!" There was silence. Amanda looked around for the people, a word that in her experience always meant grown-ups. "People," said Miss Harmon, "may I have your attention?" And then Amanda realized Miss Harmon was calling them people. It was nice to be called people, Amanda thought, because in the fifth grade, if the fifth grade was people, then each one of them was part of a people, a person, not just a child. Miss Harmon had thick, very blonde hair like the singer Patti Page, and she wore a blue dress with a design of red balloons on it. She told the class she was from Los Angeles, California. She'd come to Rome for the clean air, she said, because the smog in Los Angeles was ruining her health. She said being in Rome was an adventure for her, and that she hoped fifth grade would be an adventure for them all. Learning was an adventure, she said, and the more people learn, the more interesting lives they could have. Then Miss Harmon gave them a writing assignment. Not what I did on my summer vacation, which everyone expected, but what I like to do best and how I do it. Amanda wrote about riding Skipper. "He is not just a horse, he is my friend," she wrote. When everyone had finished writing, Miss Harmon had them all take turns reading their papers out loud to the whole class. Amanda figured Mary Jane Stoltenberg would read about her dumb paper dolls and their 14 sets of clothes and how she worshipped them and salivated over them and cried when they fell apart. But Mary Jane didn't. She read about taking a trip to the Atlantic Ocean, learning how to sail and collecting shells, and how big the ocean looked. So big, It made you feel you could see to the end of the world. Amanda thought Pamela Collins would read a paper about liking school because she was always a teacher's pet, but she didn't. She read about how much she liked to sing. Nobody was the way Amanda thought they were, especially the girls. At recess, while the boys played kickball, the girls gathered in a grassy place by the chain fence that roped off the school's front yard from the playground. For years, Amanda had played with the boys, but in 4th grade, boys had stopped playing with girls. In 4th grade, Amanda had mostly stood around thinking about when she could get back to Lost Lake to play with Lyle. But now Lyle was gone. The personal things the girls had read about themselves made Amanda want to be friends. Slowly, as if she didn't have a direction really, she edged up to them, but they didn't notice her and nobody greeted her. They all went on talking to one another about things they had done together over the summer in Rome. Amanda stood behind Mary Jane Stoltenberg's shoulder, listening. Then Mary Jane Stoltenberg stepped backward, landing hard on Amanda's foot. It must have been an accident Mary Jane didn't realize happened, because she didn't even say, "Excuse me." Still, Amanda couldn't help thinking maybe it wasn't an accident. She walked away stiffly, imitating the walk the Lone Ranger used on TV. She didn't want to go near the boys playing kickball, so she bent down and pretended to study the sunken asphalt in the middle of the playground, with a keen-eyed Lone Ranger look. But she didn't feel like the Lone Ranger. She felt like a rock that had fallen from the sky. Chapter 6, Luck. Even on a Saturday morning, her father was at work. Margaret and her mother were down on the beach, slathered with suntan lotion, trying to keep their tans. Amanda sat in the living room looking at cartoons in the Saturday Evening Post. They were mostly about foolish women who were bad drivers, who couldn't decide what they wanted, or who spent lots of money buying things that they thought made them look good, but that were really ugly. The cartoons were funny, but when Amanda hit one about a woman who always burned dinner, somehow it reminded her of the blueberry muffins, and she closed the magazine. She started leafing through her dad's outdoor life with paintings of brave, daring men up in Alaska hunting gigantic grizzly bears and reeling in huge fish. Amanda knew how to hunt and fish. Her dad had taught her, and she did it often. It was easy for her to imagine surviving by hunting and fishing and being a wilderness guide or a game warden when she grew up. But she never wanted to turn into one of those women in the Saturday Evening Post. And she didn't want to be like her mother and play bridge and work in politics and run civic organizations as a game warden. She could capture hunters who shot animals out of season and take them off to jail. Skipper would help her, of course. By the time she was a game warden, he would be very old. She closed the magazine and went outside to see him. He was standing at the fence as if he'd been waiting for her. "Do you want to go for a ride, boy?" Amanda asked, and Skipper nodded. She got his saddle and bridle from the tack room next to his stall. Skipper dipped his head and opened his mouth so she could slip the bit of the bridle into it, and she rubbed him behind the ears to thank him. Amanda saddled Skipper and lifted herself into the saddle, and Skipper took off. He galloped a long way down the dirt road, then where a shadowy old logging trail almost intersected it. Amanda raised his reins to slow him down. "Whoa, boy," she said. She wanted to ride the old logging trail, a road she had never traveled. To herself, Amanda always called it the Ghost Road. It curved off north, just a narrow break in the trees, with ferns and grass instead of pavement. 70 years before, her father said, oxen had hauled logs out of the forest over an icy track as lumbermen urged them on. Though the road had never been used once, the weight of the sledges they pulled had compressed the earth so no trees could grow in it. In another 100 years, her father said, it would still be there, a trace of a far gone past. They turned onto the old trail, a tunnel of shadowy green, with birds skimming through it. Skipper picked his way along it delicately, avoiding fallen branches. Amanda wondered how far it would go. Maybe to Canada, she thought. If it did, she wished someday she would have the courage to follow it that far north to land, so wild it had no boundaries. Sometimes when she left home on Skipper, she never wanted to go back. She was just beginning to worry about how far they really might be going when she saw a brightness ahead and suddenly the narrow road opened into a meadow. It was blazing with sun and wildflowers, black-eyed Susans with deep yellow petals and chocolate-brown centers. The goldenrod starting to turn from gold to white. A crow wheeled above it in black circles, cawing hoarsely, its voice like ice in the September sky. The sound sent a shiver of loneliness through Amanda, but still she loved the beauty of the meadow, the privilege of seeing it. She watched as the crow flew north. Then she dismounted and loosened Skipper's reins so he could lower his head to graze. The meadow was the most beautiful place Amanda had ever seen. She sat down on a fallen log, wishing Lyle were with her. What would he have said about her being average, she wondered. Maybe he would have said, "Average people can be smart. Average people can be lucky." She said it out loud to herself, the way she thought Lyle might have said it. It sounded true, and then, almost like a sign that it was true, in the grass she saw a 4-leaf clover. Everybody said 4-leaf clovers were lucky. In the summer, kids spent hours and hours trying to find them. Amanda had never found one before. She picked it with her right hand, her Lyle leverage hand, and put it in the pocket of her shirt. It sounds like Amanda is starting her adventure. So, have you ever been surprised about others the way Amanda was surprised about her classmates? What could Amanda have done to include herself in that group? How could she have entered the group? And how could the others have accepted her and made it easier for her to enter and include Amanda in the group before Mary Jane stepped on her foot? And for chapter 6, do you think that that was an adventure that Amanda went on? And what kind of adventure would you go on if you had Skipper? What would you do if you had the woods all to yourself? Where would you go? Thank you again for following along, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Until next time, this was Camp Chapters, and I hope and wish you well. Goodbye.